Well, welcome back, everyone. It's, I don't know about you all, I'm sure this is the case, a great conversation in the room that I joined. It was really uplifting. And as you can see, I've changed my outfit. And this is in honor of Principal Mola and the amazing work that he's doing in education in DC at Cardozo High School. And the visit, we were so fortunate to have the TeachHouse Fellows in DC at his high school and to really see in action the amazing work that he's doing. So just a little bit about Principal Mola. The son of Cuban immigrants, Art Mola grew up in the Bronx and holds a master's degree with a focus on bilingual education and ESL. He began his career 21 years ago as a middle school and high school teacher in Oakland, California. In 2015, Mola joined the DC public school community as principal of Bancroft Elementary School, a dual immersion school. In 4 years, Mola transformed Bancroft from a turnaround school to a 4-star school with one of the highest attendance rates in DC. In 2019, Mola became the principal of Francis L. Cardozo Education Campus, a 6th through 12th grade school in Northwest DC. Art draws inspiration from Frederick Douglass's famous speech, The Race Problem, delivered at the Metropolitan AME Church in DC. Referring to the nation that had failed his people, Douglass challenged everyone with these words: "I, for one, have gone through all this. I've had 50 years of it, and yet I have not lost either heart or hope." Mola believes the students at Cardozo face mounting challenges all around them every day, but he hopes he can lead by example with the same passion that Frederick Douglass led this country, to never lose heart or hope. And it's my pleasure to welcome Art Mola.
Wow, thank you, Jan. I am humbled, and thank you for sporting the Cardozo and the school to prison pipeline. I'm honored and thrilled. Before I move on, I hope my sound is coming through clear for folks. Great, thanks for the thumbs up, Corey. And I'm gonna show a few slides, only to just guide the presentation, but more importantly, because there are things that I wanted to share with everyone that are very dear and personal to me. But first, let me begin by saying I just left the most awesome breakout group with Mr. D. So if anybody knows Mr. D in this audience, big props to his gamification presentation. Awesome. I'm going to take a lot of that back to Cardozo. And I just got to give a big shout out to Holly's presentation this, to open us up. And I might steal a thing or two as I go through my talk. So thank you, Holly, for really, exposing, the reality of our educational system in places where our students come from backgrounds of poverty and other community stressors, referring to the broken system. I completely agree. And that quote, martyrdom is the result of that broken system. I couldn't agree with you more. So if you guys would indulge me and allow me to share my screen just momentarily, for the simple fact of having something to speak from. There we go. All right. Wonderful. All right. So I thought long and hard about, what is it that I could share with educators, either continuing on this journey or getting ready to embark upon this journey. I can't think of anything that I enjoy doing more than having a captive audience of very eager, motivated, inspired, educators, young people getting ready to do this work that I compare to something just short of supernatural. And for me, I land on these three things. Of course, to make it count, we have to embrace and appreciate the humility, the responsibility, and the joy of this work. In talking about the humility of this work, it's important to recognize that whether you have any type of spiritual foundation, whether it comes from religious beliefs or not, whether you are atheist, agnostic, Christian, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist or not, there is a certain element to this work that has to ground you in what I call humility. And I draw from two individuals in particular that I found very inspiring throughout my journey. Many years ago, stumbling across A.W. Tozer, and just a few years ago, coming across Ta-Nehisi Coates. And A.W. Tozer, while this book has, a spiritual Christian foundation to it, there is something that's very important to what he says when it comes to going out and answering that call to whatever you consider your mission field. I consider education and my journey for these past 21 years to be my calling. That's the mission field that I felt called to me. I say that because I had a life-changing experience. There was an Art Mola before he became a teacher who did something completely different and had no intentions of ever becoming an educator. But then, a moment occurred in my life. And for me, that was the calling. However, in A.W. Tozer's book, he speaks of the missionary who answers the call from a place of from a very egotistical approach, in that they have to solve some problem. In this particular case, if I give you the context of the religious foundation of it, it's as if, God made a big mess and now he needs us to clean it. And when we go into public education, especially in lower income urban communities, if you're not careful, you may enter into that space seeing yourself as some type of savior to that problem that has resulted in inequities and achievement gaps, particularly and overwhelmingly against the favor of children of color. And if you go into that space feeling that way, I have to warn you and caution you not to do that, because this work will humble you quickly. And if for some reason you go into this work feeling like you're the answer, or you and a group of others are the answer to this problem, then you're going to experience years of disappointment, because this work will chew you up and eat you and spit you out. And I ground that in Ta-Nehisi's book, Between the World and Me, when he speaks about the crippling nature of racism and how much damage and harm it has done, that you can't possibly go into this thinking that you are going to be the teacher that finally solves this mess, right? You have to be very intentional, practical, and of course, humble when going into this work, and accept the fact that you're not the solution. You in and of itself is not the solution. In the book by A.W. Tozer, he says, like, the most insulting thing that you can say to a Christian missionary going into the mission field is, that God actually doesn't need him or her. Well, same thing. Art Mola might be a celebrated principal, but I promise you, if for whatever reason the district decides, Art Mola, we don't need you anymore today. Thank you for your service. We're going to go in a different direction. Guess what? Cardozo will open up tomorrow. There will be students coming to the school. Will there be a change? Maybe, right? But the operation and the system will continue to move forward without you. So I say that to build up to this piece. It's the responsibility of this work that gives me, that drive and that feeling of honor to be doing it. I think of a colleague of mine, Dr. Jeffrey Duncan Andrade and Ernest Morel, who wrote the book, The Art of Critical Pedagogy. And in this book, he talks about schools being the de facto sorting mechanism for where children will land when they become adults. Hence the hoodie ending the school to prison pipeline. A school like Cardozo that is overwhelmingly populated by students coming from challenging backgrounds, schools, those students are going to experience a great deal of situations and challenges that puts them at risk for encounters with law enforcers, will put them at risk of having to compromise their values if there's not enough money to pay the rent, if there's not enough money to buy food, if there's not enough money to buy clothes. They will come across factors after factors that will constantly put them at risk of being introduced to the judicial system simply because they came into this space, this world, lacking the resources that many of you and myself included take for granted. In Alameda County, California, where I taught in the city of Oakland, East Oakland to be specific, my school was centered in a 3.5 square mile section of East Oakland. For those that don't know a lot about East Oakland, years ago, this was like the hot spot for where all the gangs converged. And everything that occurred in this 3.5 square mile section of Oakland resulted in the Alameda County Correctional Facility, which is just a few cities over, results in a pipeline of children and young adults going to the Alameda County Correctional Facility as inmates. And if you were to do a study and ask every inmate within Alameda County, which Alameda County is a population of nearly 3 million, the city of Oakland is only 450 to 500,000 residents. However, if you were to ask every inmate inside the Alameda County Correctional Facility, if you were to be released right now, where would you return? Where is home for you? 60% of the inmates in that lockup facility call some place within that 3.5 square mile section of East Oakland, they call that home. So my school was right in the middle of that 3.5 square mile section. So what does that tell you about the school that I first started teaching at when I got into education? That school was known for preparing the adults that were going into the least desirable spaces in life, whether that was service industry, military, as honorable as a service as that may be. Those are not necessarily the most desirable employment choices for folks. And then last but not least, the prison system. I leave one out that often gets left out, and that is, while there's a school to prison pipeline, there's also a school to grave pipeline. And schools like Havens Court Education Campus in East Oakland, schools like Cardozo Education Campus in Washington, D.C., sadly do a better job of preparing children for those futures than they do for the futures, for the careers that we know affluent schools are most known for preparing their children for. So there's that responsibility of this work that we must embrace. And then last but not least, the joy of this work. And I'll show this slide, which is a quote that I put together to define myself and what matters to me. And I will read it verbatim for you. every day I find gratification and joy knowing that I've committed myself to a purpose that is greater than me, that I lead out of faith in something that owes me no compensation. And whether I succeeded or not, what mattered is that I served without reservation. I find more satisfaction in this than achieving any personal goal or victory that brings me temporary fulfillment. Um, this is my food. This is my energy. This is my vitamin. I say that because if we go into this profession with the intent that we're going to be very humble, educators and servers of youth and missionary like servants of children and colleagues, that will wear off after a while. That energy and that kind of drive and approach, it tends to wear off if what you were expecting on the other side of that is some level of recognition or acknowledgement. I saw in the chat during Holly's presentation, folks were saying like, hey, adults are kids too. Sometimes we need a nap, right? Like we need our food, right? We need mental health as well, and take a mental health day. As a principal, Kim Marshall said something during a training that I attended. He said, if you don't feed the teachers, they'll eat the children. And I believe that wholeheartedly. But I will say that if we go into this work hoping to receive some kind of award, some kind of recognition, some kind of newspaper article or a teacher of the year, principal of the year, if that's what you hope and expect is on the other end of this, then I say strongly reconsider why it is that you're going into this work or continuing in this work, because more than not, that won't be the case. Rarely will you get recognized. Rarely will you get awarded. Rarely will you get a bonus. Rarely will you get any of those things that our human soul wants to be fed. It can be fed in many other different spaces that way. But I warn you not to allow this field to be that space that you're expecting it out of. It's quite the opposite. We should feel fortunate to be going into this field because, as I said, this is something short of supernatural. The idea that we get the opportunity to invest in the lives of children who, if we do everything right every day, still might not be enough. But if we all did everything right every day, then what's on the other side of the life of that child is the type of experience as an adult that we would want for everybody. Because at the end of the day, it's happiness that we are striving for. And for me, my happiness comes from this opportunity. The fact that I get to invest and come back and pour back into the thing that gave me an opportunity to be who I am today. And as I close, on this screen, you'll see this was one of my classes in East Oakland. And, I always said, give me the rough and rugged. give me the students nobody else wants. Those are my favorite. And we make mountains move. And this group of students was one of my first graduating classes. And we did so much. I took them to the state prison facility in California called San Quentin and introduced them to a leadership program of lifers in jail who turned their lives around in jail. They'll never get out of jail, but they still chose to turn their life around while in jail and wanted to become mentors of young people. I connected with that program. In doing so, so many of my students who were either at risk for, the gang life, the drug life, the crime life, were able to take a different path and go into a university experience. However, that wasn't true for all of the children in this picture. Of these 20, I can tell you, 2 are deceased. A few others have gone to prison or have already, have experienced the judicial system. And to say that, 10 to 20% of young people, that you could predict that almost 20% of young people coming from places like East Oakland, and that you could predict almost with accuracy, certainty and accuracy, that that's going to be the outcome for some young people. In other communities, that would draw outrage. But as in Jeffrey Duncan's book, he states, we don't even bat an eye at knowing, when those outcomes occur. And then last but not least, kneeling down right next to me, and I don't know if any of you have been following the stories and the reports. I know CNN covered it, and a lot of other regional and national news outlets have covered it. But Mario Gonzalez Andrade recently was killed by two Alameda County police officers just a few weeks ago, a day before his brother's birthday and just a couple of weeks before Mother's Day. He was one of my students. And that mother lost not one son, because her other son, Victor, was murdered by violence a few years back. Mario lost his life at the hand of a police officer that was kneeling on his back until he finally passed out and died. There's a federal investigation that is being sought in this matter. And I just wanted to elevate, the humanity of this work, because Mario was just a charming young man who had a bright future and loved his family, and was a father, and took care of his mother and took care of his autistic brother. And now he's gone. So I'll share these slides with everyone afterwards, and so that you can click on these links and learn a little bit more about Mario, because what matters is for people to know who was Mario. He wasn't some kid from the hood. He wasn't a thug. He was just a regular good kid. And we're doing everything we can to get justice, not just for him, but for his family, who is now missing him and without him. Thank you, Jan. It was an honor and a privilege to have this audience. And I hope I've inspired at least one, to go into this work with a humble heart, and just enjoy the ride.
That was powerful. Thank you so much, Art. Service without reservation is something that really is resonating with me. And so many things that you shared. Thank you for sharing your slides as well. And thank you for being here.